Hello, hello. I am tired, which means it's a great time to record some password. It means I'll make several mistakes while reading, and I know how you all like that. Or at least, maybe. I don't know. People don't comment on these videos, so I don't know how people feel. It is what it is, though. I wandered out from the kitchen into the hall leading to the foyer. My friends were on the other side of the wall, conversing among themselves, and while I can't hear specifics, I could make out they seemed happy enough. So why aren't I happy? When I thought about where my sadness stemmed from, there was only really one place. A room that I barely lingered in if I didn't need to. Yeah, I'd been that way for, well, it was the room where I was told what had happened. Most of the time when I went for a walk, it was Most of the time when I went for a walk, it was to get out of the house, just down the street, and rarely in wildlife like this. Dean had driven me out to a big garden before, and we'd walked around together, but that was just something to do, right? Then there was Tyson, and occasional trips down to the beach. It had a lot of great memories, despite getting told constantly not to eat ice cream inside the car. There was something about how ice cream tasted whenever we went through, somehow sweeter, or maybe it just reminded me of a happier time as a whole. I looked around at the trees before glancing back at the house. If I wandered further in, maybe I could have some time alone, right? There was a risk for sure. Much like what happened with Roswell, I could end up out here, but could end up out there here. Okay, yeah. But was that really bad? Was spending a night out in the woods all that bad? If I wasn't around, I couldn't be hurt by what the vault showed me. I wouldn't have to look at my friends looking at me funny. Was it pity? Disappointment? I don't really know. Trudging into the forest, I felt them all behind. I could hear the sound of running water after a while of walking. I couldn't say just how long I'd been walking, but eventually I arrived at the river. The water was clear, the sound of it oddly calming, and taking the edge off. Someone had mentioned this, but at the moment I couldn't remember exactly who told me about it. Taking a look around, it seemed as if I was totally alone. No fish in the river, no sound of other animals or birds, or anyone else nearby. I almost felt like I was the last one standing as I stood at the edge of the water, looking down to my reflection. Without the choking smell of chlorine, I sighed out and looked at the hyena staring back at me. My hands traced my cheeks, across my underbite to my nose. The way the water rippled made me squint to make out all the details. Shy of the fur color, I was the spitting image of my dad. It was a legacy that I wasn't sure I liked now. Looking at myself in the mirror was a harsh reminder of him gone, right down to being unable to smile at my reflection. I thought about if he was watching over me, and what hope that sentiment felt more like a curse weighing me down, not through anyone else's fault, but my own. Looking up at the river, it winded through the trees, cascading over a cliff off to the distance and further on. Where did the river turn? Was there anything else out there? Wandering upstream, I figured I'd see where it went, climbing up a step and inclined near the waterfall. I dusted myself off and looked around for anything else that might have looked different. From what I could tell, this clearing by the river seemed to be a makeshift campsite. I wonder. Okay. I wonder. There was a ring of stone placed around the middle of the clearing. with a large log sitting nearby, acting as a bench. Taking a seat, I looked around. It seemed nice enough, but a crisp breeze made me realize just how cold it could get out here late at night. I closed my eyes and breathed in, the fresh air helping clear my head a little bit. But with a clear mind, thoughts came rushing in to fill the space, making me think of home. Come on, sport. Where are we going? Dad puffed out his chest, hands on his hips proudly. Don't want an adventure with your old man? Always, Dad. Good. Then buckle up because we're gonna get something awesome to eat when we get there. Is Mom coming? Not this time, bud. She's at work. It almost seems like she never wants to come out with us anymore. I sighed, hopping to the car, closing the door before buckling myself in. Dad tapped on the window, indicating for me to lower it. Why the long face, bucko? Fidgeting in my chair, I tried to keep my eyes anywhere than his as he stuck his head through the window slightly to look at me properly, fishing for an answer. No reason, I guess. Seems like there might be one. You won't get mad at me, right? No matter what. So what's got you down? Mom still loves me, right? What? It was enough to make him recoil and hit his head on the roof of the car as he pulled back in shock. What would make you think that? Just, she's barely home, and I don't really remember the last time she smiled at me. Did I do something wrong? Don't you ever think that we don't love you, David. You did nothing wrong, I promise. He had his serious tone going, staring me down. I'm sorry. Dad sighed, returning his head through his fur before running his hands through his fur, wandering around the car and jumping into the driver's seat and buckling himself in. We didn't leave the driveway. Instead, his fingers just drummed on the steering wheel. It was the only sound we had, as he hadn't even started the car, and when he stopped, I turned to look at him. He just smiled at me. Maybe it was a brave face or something else I couldn't say. I remember what he said next, or at least the individual words, but for the life of me, I couldn't remember specifically how it sounded. I love you. As I opened my eyes, the campsite came back into view. The world around me hadn't changed outside the faint sounds of nature, now being something I was more aware of. Had it all just been drowned out as I had lost myself in my head, or... In a daze, my eyes looked to the water as I sat on the log, watching it flow steadily downstream. I wondered what would happen if I drowned right here, if this was the place I died. I wondered if it would hurt, or if some miracle would come along and stop it from happening. I wondered why the idea didn't scare me as much as it probably should have. Was I a coward? Selfish? Probably. Of all the places to choose, at least here was peaceful. It would solve all my problems in one go. My sadness, my stress, and guilt. I'd be able to see Dad again, hopefully. Before I knew it, I was standing up slowly and walking towards the water's edge. My feet felt heavy, but my chest felt light. I wasn't having trouble breathing, but each breath rattled out of me, barely parted mouth. Step by step, I got closer, not breaking stride once with my eyes locked on the spot, somewhere in the middle of the river. Before I could second guess, if I was going to follow through on falling into the water, I stepped on something hard and solid and smooth, enough to make me look down to see what it was. What? I looked at what I'd picked up, rolling in my hand, a thick syringe. What? With its needle cap off by some sort of plastic thing at the end. Had it been used? Why was it here? In the sunlight, I caught a glimpse of something half buried underneath some leaves, and now, distracted from what I originally was doing, I investigated. Kneeling down, I picked up what that was, assuming another needle, but instead it was a bottle. Small, unassuming outside the label it had neatly printed on its front. Crypto... Crypto... Hmm. The first word was long, and I wasn't sure I knew exactly how to pronounce it, but the second word I'd heard before. Some sort of illness that Mom had mentioned once, I think. With an item in each hand, I looked between the two. The bottle was empty, with the foil seal on the top punctured. The needle, while capped, still had what looks like the condensation inside. A few moments later, I yelped and quickly dropped both, drawing a conclusion I didn't want to believe. Did someone inject themselves here? Or did someone else inject another person? The only person I knew that was around here was Roswell. But that thing that was following me, was that out here? Could that have been part of this? I picked up both and put them into my pockets carefully. Oswin said things have gone missing from his lab, so maybe this was some of it. Either way, he'd know better. My mind raced with what it all meant, but I looked around again. My resolve and focus on going into the river was shot, and likely for the better. But instead it was replaced with curiosity, and I headed upstream. I lost track of how long I walked, but I was in no hurry. Taking occasional breaks to look about the trees, something gave me the impression that I was being watched. Before me, sitting right along the water's edge, was a rundown mill, moss and vines seemingly to have claimed the place after years of no use. Just like before, the place seemed quiet and serene. I would have said that it felt like I was truly alone if the feeling that I was being watched didn't get stronger the longer I stood out in the open. Is anyone there? Carefully looking around, I called out quietly. Silence. Nothing but silence to answer my question. I didn't really want to go inside the mill. After all, who knows what could have been in there, or if I wouldn't accidentally step on a loose floor panel and get trapped. It was a reminder that I didn't tell anyone where I was going, but I only had myself to blame. I couldn't get angry about them not coming to save me because I didn't give them the chance. Not only that, but when I got back, I had no excuse for them to be mad at me for being a hypocrite once again. I slumped my shoulders and sighed, leaning up against one of the beams holding up a trough up above me, bracing against something I whined out. My troubles making me hesitate in turning back now. My ears perked as the sound of a twig snapping, and I looked around. Eyes darting around the trees for its source, I heard it again. Out in the open, the sound echoed around me, and it was hard to place exactly where it had come from. Being out in the open left me exposed, and I felt it now, deciding that heading inside might not be the worst idea, all things considered. Inside the mill was dirty, and much like the outside, nature had claimed most of it. Walls were cracked, but the stonework held together, despite the vines growing through a hole in the wall. Looking behind me, it seemed if I was being followed, I ducked behind the doorway to try and stay out of sight. Not that it'd help if I'd already been spotted. Reaching inside my pocket, I held out the syringe, reminding myself that I had some way of a weapon just in case things went sour. It didn't look like there was any abandoned tools nearby that I could make for a better option anyway. I heard another twig snap, followed by someone calling out, "Hello? Someone out here?" The voice had a tinge of amusement to it, somewhat squeaky too, so I could rule out it being any of my friends. Even Oswin and Benson didn't have a sound that matched that. Peering around the corner, I didn't see anything. No sign of whatever it was that was also out there. They kept calling, asking where I was hiding, but it seemed as if they weren't making any effort to get closer. I weighed up further, heading further into the mill in an effort to hide. as leaving would just let whoever was calling out find me, right? It grew colder as I ventured further in, and it seemed like I was heading more underground too. The air was stale down here. Well, that's fun music, isn't it? Where was I? It was stale down here, and here were half-broken slabs of concrete making up the flooring. Large pipes and machines seemed to be everywhere, all powered by the water wheel outside. Or if it was powered by anything else, I couldn't see a generator. There was something about this place that made me feel odd. The ceiling was high above, jagged pieces of metal jutting out of an odd angles from the ceiling, from where they'd rusted and fallen apart over time. How deep did this place go? What was it for? Lumber? Off to the side, there seemed to be a chute? Yeah, for something to drop down. A chute. It's a chute. Okay. For something to drop down from the level above and onto a conveyor belt that ran along one side of the wall. At the end of this was a saw blade, ready to cut whatever was sent down the path to it. There was something about this place that I couldn't quite place. It wasn't sadness, but a feeling of unease that came from within, familiar in a way, but I couldn't place how. Hello? There was that voice again, smug and assumed as before, but now closer. The voice echoed through the building, and I backed up against one of the large metal chambers that dotted the room I was in. Footsteps, light but somewhat clumsy maybe, but that wasn't what stuck out to me. As good as my nose was, I couldn't smell them at all. Nothing to distinguish who they could be or anything. Was it because of the air in here? Straining my ears, I listened as they moved around, searching for me. They could have been friendly, for all I know, but something about this just seemed like bad news. Their footsteps sounded like they got closer before stopping instantly. Gripping the syringe tightly, I waited. And waited. I let out a breath that I didn't realize I'd been holding, figuring that I must have just misheard them leaving. Oh. The shock made me fall over and I hit my head as I landed, passing out. Ow. When I came to, I was outside. It seemed dark, and I wasn't sure exactly how long I'd been out for. I was only half certain of what I'd seen right before falling over and sat up, groaning. Quickly checking my pockets, it seemed as though I had everything still, much to my relief. My head was still spinning, but I seemed unharmed outside of the tumble, and I let myself properly get my bearings. Whoever that was I ran into didn't seem to be around right now, and I wobbled on my feet as I stood up. How late is it? About 6. What? I fell over again, landing on my rear and yelping as I nursed my tail. What, you got a curfew? I'm just giving him Roswell's voice, aren't I? Whatever. I was kind of wondering when this character would show up, because I did see artwork of him, so. Don't know who he is, though. Only know his design. No, I mean, Oh, scared ya. Not gonna laugh at me, are ya? I stared at the hair, unsure of what to make of things. Sheesh, watching you has been a hoot, but didn't think you'd be so flighty. More on edge than any of the game out here, that's for sure. The game? Animals? Got it in one. Didn't expect a hyena out here, though. He gestured wide with his arms briefly before staring at me some more. What's your name, kid? Dave. And what's a hyena like yourself doing this far out, Just on a walk, I guess. A walk? On this mountain? Yeah. The hare whistled, looking around. Must be a long walk given you look like city folk. Well, no, The hare stared at me a moment, waiting. Well, you couldn't just walk here from the city. My guess is you're one of them Hammond kids. Me? No, I'm just staying there, I guess. His attitude seemed to shift, disappointed maybe. It was hard to tell. Just a guest? Shame. Shame how? Well, getting in one good with a rich folk is never a bad thing. Could have one of their guests. Can't have one of their guests lost out in the woods now, can we? I'm not that lost, Mister. Oh, me? I'm no one. Call me Jack. Oh, well, I feel like I should be concerned by a character striking a pose like this, but yeah, no, it's probably fine. Jack, okay. Jack was the name of the guy we murdered in Smoke Room, right? That Samuel was just like, I'm gonna take a pickaxe to your head. Real cool guy. Love me some Samuel. That smile he wore felt off somewhat, so much so that when I smiled back, I felt like I'd something wrong. Was his dialogue always like that? Okay, no, it shifts to blue for some reason. Like, oh, okay. Uh, well then, Dave, you had a bit of a fall inside the mill, so I brought you out here. Only because you snuck up on me. Really now, didn't think you'd scare so easy when you're out here by yourself. Didn't think a place as big as a Hammond, as the Hammonds would host only one guest at a time either. Oh, it's not just me. Whole family of hyenas visiting? Well, I imagine that house is full of laughs then. No, it's just me and some friends. Friends? It was almost as if the concept was foreign to him with how thoughtful he seemed to be after echoing what I said. Huh. Sounds fun. It's been something like that. You kidding? A whole mansion and you ain't having fun? I groaned and slumped on the spot. There's been just a lot going on at the house. I probably shouldn't get into it. No. And why's that? Yeah, you know the house, right? I mean, of course you do, because you know the name of the person that owns it, so. Oh, yeah, plenty of stories about that place. There are stories? Sure is. Recluse lives there now with his butler, smart as a whip, and occasionally get a visitor every now and again. That's not much of a story. Well, that's not the story. The story is that he's got a machine in his basement. You wouldn't have it. You wouldn't happen to have seen it, given you're living there, have you? Oh, you mean? I caught myself before I said anything more, noticing Jack's eyes light up the moment I trailed off. So it does exist. Well, that's nice to hear, given what I know about it. You heard about it too? I've been told about it, sure. Hard not to remember talk of a time machine someone's built. It wasn't a time machine, was it? This was why the door hadn't been opened. Was Oswin just lying about it? With how funny Jack was being, I was leaning towards believing what Oswin had said about it. Well, maybe I should see if I could get it working when I get back at the house next. If you ever get there. Huh. What? Do you know your way back? Reckon you're stuck without a guide. Oh, I'm sure I could figure it out. I'll just head back down the river until I find somewhere familiar and then wander back from there. River doesn't go anywhere near the house. You just end up getting to a waterfall at a sheer cliff before you got back to the city, too. It's not that bad, is it? You're welcome to find out. What about you? Why are you even out here? Just hunting. After all, these are some big mountains, and there's nothing like being out where no one else is around to bother you. I'm sorry if I bothered you then. I just figured the mill was something neat to look at. No bother. Wonder who was wandering around out here. You sure you're fine to head back on the house by yourself? Yeah, I'll be fine. Thanks. Something wasn't right. Stranger danger was a thing that I had been taught as a kid, and it didn't really sink in now to what that had meant. I was given I was getting an off feeling about Jack, something about how he moved, talked, or even stood there as time went by. You know your way back, Dave? I'll figure it out. You hit your head pretty hard, Dave. Maybe I should take you back to where I'm staying so you can rest. No, I'm good, really. I took a couple steps back, shooting him a wry smile. It wasn't at all convincing, but I didn't want to turn my back to him either. Do you at least want me to point you in the right direction? You know where the house is? General location, sure. Wouldn't be much of a hunter if I couldn't navigate this forest, would I? Without me asking, he pointed in a direction away from the river, through the trees. Head that way. Terrain might make it a little hard, but that's the direction the house is in. Get a long walk ahead of you, though. I chanced to look in the direction he pointed to before looking back at him. Thanks. Don't worry about it. I'm just gonna head on back to my own little hidey hole, I think. Safe travels, Dave. I watched as he turned on his heels and wandered off, disappearing out of sight in the opposite direction to where I was heading. Siding out, I took a longer look at where I needed to go. Jack had the right of it in that I had no idea where I was, but I could do is head down the river until I found the camp and go from there, right? Rather than cutting through the trees, I figured I'd wander back down the river and keep in mind the direction that he pointed out to me. I didn't really want to have a difficult walk ahead of me if I could avoid it. My stomach rumbled, now feeling a little hungry. It's what I got from not eating for almost 2 days now. What little I'd had just wasn't cutting it anymore. I wonder what's for dinner. I sat on the log to catch my breath, knowing I still had a while left to go before I got to the house. My mind wandered back to those at the house, and it started to sink in how silly I had been just leaving it like that. They were probably worried, and the guilt returned to rid me of my appetite. Pulling out the needle in the bottle, I gave them another look over, considering this was where I would found them. The needle you could probably buy just anywhere, but the bottle is what worries me. It didn't seem like this was just something you could pick up at the pharmacy. They were meant to sell bottles of medicine through the bottles of disease, after all. What seemed strange to me was why? If you were going to inject yourself with something, why not medication? Why not a poison? Or even if you weren't going to inject yourself, but try to inject someone you snuck up on, why not something more dangerous? Was the idea to pass this off as a medicine and hope they didn't notice? Shaking my head, I put them back in my pocket. I just have to figure it out after I got back to the house. I looked up at the trees, noticing that I was quickly losing light. I'd need to hurry if I was going to make it back to the house before it was completely dark. It was dark enough already that it was no wonder Roswell's got stuck out here. Thinking back to when he left the house, I wondered if it was better to just stay here for the night. Not that I really wanted to, but also didn't want to get lost in the woods. I noticed some mushrooms growing nearby and weighed up whether or not that was an option for dinner, if I could remember if they were safe. But if they weren't, I had no idea. I had no way of knowing. I could just as easily poison myself, and maybe getting back to the house all the harder, if not impossible. Sighing out, I then looked to the river. I could fish maybe, and just find a sharp enough stick and try what they did on the TV But I could barely make out anything underneath the water to even know where to aim. I cradled my chin in my hands, and through it was with a sigh, wait here, or try to stumble through the woods and get back. The sound of a take stack nearby made me look up. Jack reappeared, slowly approaching. Still out here? Didn't I point you the way back? You did, but, you said difficult terrain. He chuckled, rolling his shoulders. Not about to deal with difficult terrain. Not able to deal with difficult terrain, huh? Good to know. I was wondering what you meant by that. Did you mean rocks, cliffs, or does it matter? Didn't end up going that way. I guess not. He got closer, resting his foot on the log, leaning down at me. I leaned back away from him as he did so, reflexively going to the needle concealed in my pocket. Planning on camping here? Not a bad spot. I haven't decided yet. I thought you were on your way. Why are you downstream? Well, you know me. Guess I got lost. He chuckled low while keeping his eyes on me, inching closer still, for me to shift a little back, and he seemed to get the message. You came out here all alone? Didn't bring anything for supplies? What are you, an idiot? Yep. That's not very nice. No, it's not. But who the fuck cares anyway? Oh, that's aggressive. Well, yeah, I care. Leave me alone. Come now, Dave. Haven't you ever heard about the kindness of a stranger? Maybe you should come back with me to my shelter and stay the night. I can tell you about your friends. Oh, you can tell me about your friends and what got you down with that house you're staying at. I stood, and for a moment, it almost seemed like Jack's expression shifted more towards a smug satisfaction. But then it faded away as soon as after it was clear that I wasn't intending to follow him anywhere. I'm gonna head back now. Thanks for getting me out of the mill, I guess. In a flash, he moved forward, grabbing me by the arm. I don't do anything for free. You owe me. Hey, let me go. Not just yet, Dave. I know something you can pay me back with. There's a thing I want to know. You met the guy that owns the place, right? I spoke without thinking, trying to pull my arm away from him as my priority. Oswin Hammond? Right as I pulled my arm away, letting me land on my back on the ground. Oh, good. That makes it easier. What was his butler? What about his butler? He's still kicking? Yes. He's old, but sure, he's around. Jack didn't seem to like the answer. His jaw clenched, and he stared down at me with his voice lower. Well, that's just great, isn't it? Here I was hoping that this was going to be an easy job, too. Oh well, I don't mind a messy job when the pay is this good. I don't understand. What do you mean? I got to my feet, edging away from Jack further. There was no point in being subtle about it now. I wanted to get away. All the while, he just grinned, looming over me. What I mean is that I've been out here for a week, bored out of my mind, and I want to have a little fun. So get running, Dave. That's a knife. Let's play tag. The moment I saw the knife, I ran. I didn't need to stick around to wonder what he was intending to do with it. I had no idea where I was going. I could barely see, and it took everything I had to stop myself from tripping over the many roots that lined the forest floor. How I wished I was more fit. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my lungs felt like they were on fire. It was a wonder that I hadn't collapsed from exhaustion. I felt a chill run down my spine as I heard Jack somewhere behind me, calling out in a sing-song sort of tone. Dave, run fast as you can. I felt it was a fear that I couldn't have felt before. Cold and dark, somewhere deep down that seemed to keep me moving forward. It was different from the cliff and the river. It was different from back home. It was different, it was even different from thinking about my friends, and I wasn't sure if that was a good or a bad thing. The darkness of the forest seemed to ease up. Maybe I was getting used to it, or maybe being chased with my life on the line was making this easier. Not that I had any way of knowing which way I was going. Gonna have to do better than that, Dave. I yelped as I rounded a tree and dove around Jack as he swiped lazily with his knife. I could feel the sting of it shear some of my fur off my ear, and I continued on. Keep running, playtime isn't over yet. With one hand on my ear and the other propelling myself forward, I struggled to find my way. It all looked the same. The woods outside. My breathing was quiet. But then I knew where to go. I didn't see it, but I could smell it. Apple pie. I knew that smell. Orlando must have baked something to lead me back to the house. What guilt I would have felt about not doing the same thing for Roswell would need to wait. All I had to do was follow my nose and I'd be safe. I'd be with my friends. It wasn't home, but I'd do. Jack was still following me, though. Every moment I had to stop to take a deep breath. I could hear him somewhere behind me approaching. He wasn't running like I was, but pacing himself. Maybe his stamina was just better. Then, through the trees, I could see the soft glow of light, the smell of apple pie growing stronger, too. There! I'm there! I looked behind me, and I could still see Jack, still with his knife and gaining speed, while his white fur sticking out in the darkness of the night like a ghost. Not there yet. Whining, I tried to lose him. The last little bit through the trees, but almost choked as he grabbed the back of my shirt, pulling me back towards him and then into a tree. Winded, I clutched my chest. The house was right there, and as I turned to look, I felt the tip of Jack's knife at my throat. I closed my eyes. What else was there to do? It'd be over soon, hopefully. From how hard I was running, I could barely form words. It wasn't much of an upside, but at least they'd be able to find my body easily. The sound of a gunshot made both of us jump, and just as quickly as I'd realized what had happened, I fell to the ground, covering my head. Cowering on the ground, I heard my assailant flee into the woods again. Despite being so close to the house, I didn't feel so good. I didn't feel safe. Instead, I felt sick, like I was able to pass out, but something was keeping me conscious. I couldn't keep my thoughts together. My tongue tangled, and my inability to pull myself together was making me hyperventilate. The adrenaline was nice while I was running away, but now I couldn't. I could barely breathe as I clutched my chest. I collapsed to the ground, clutching my chest. Had I been shot? Had Jack? What had happened? Dave! Looking up, I could see Dean skid to a halt in front of me, dropping to his knees and holding me by the shoulders. I wanted to tell him what had just happened, what I'd seen, and how I was feeling. But nothing came out of my mouth except a raspy breath and the offset of nausea. God, you're pale. Were you out in the forest all day? What happened? Dean, did... I looked to Orlando, eased back into my knees by Dean. Everyone, Dean found him. He was quick to leave again, rushing off somewhere out of sight. Clinging to Dean, I whined and gasped for air, my heart pounding in my chest. Trying to keep myself centered on Dean's honey-like scent, I struggled to calm myself down. It's Dave. Yes, I can see that. Who? I heard a gunshot, and... We can discuss this later. Get inside, boy. Get the boy inside. Dean picked me up, and I clung to him, digging into the muscle under the fur, as if letting go was the same as dying then and there. Where is that fucking rabbit? I could tell it was Oswin, although his tone was different. Almost crazy, and I could make out what seemed to be a revolver in his hand before he shoved it back into his pocket. Damn it all! Sir, now is not the time to be gallivanting around on a crusade over rabbits. Oswin grunted, standing stiff. Was he the one that fired? How? From where? I opened my mouth to thank him, but nothing came out. At least Dave is accounted for now, but he's suffering. The sound I made was a mix between a whine and rasping cough, the tightness in my chest becoming worse. Then do something about it. You're a doctor, right? Again, I tried to speak as Oswin stepped closer, looking me in the eye. Set him down, Dean. As if afraid of breaking me, he sat me down on the stairs, sitting me against him for additional support. It's all right, Dave. You're safe now. You had us all worried. Help. It took everything I had to get the word out, and I tried to stand, slipping on the stairs below me and falling onto the cold tiles of the foyer floor. In a flash, Dean was by my side as I heard the others rushing closer. We were in danger. They were all in danger, and it was my fault. I couldn't breathe. My vision was blurry, and I was starting to lose my ability to hear. I've got an idea. A Tyson-y shaped blur rushed past up the stairs until I could no longer discern his scent among the others. Dean seemed to know what his plan was and hurried along to follow him soon after. Dave, listen to me. I need you to tell me where the rabbit went. You can't be serious. That's the priority you have right now? Roswell went ignored, and Oswin stopped next to me, shifting me so he could make eye contact easier. It's very important. Where did he go? It took everything I had to shake my head. The scent of gunpowder was strong on Oswin, and it was bringing back memories to the surface that I couldn't fight off. Should we get him somewhere? Maybe we should at least pick him off the floor. Dave, try to relax. I'll put you in your bed, and when you're ready, you can tell us what happened. As Sal came down to pick me up, I pushed him away. I could do it. I had to. Dave, please. Sal, stand down. What are you going to do? In a flash, Oswin pulled something from his coat and thrust it against my neck. The sound of air escaping indicates something had happened. What did you do? Something I was saving for the rabbit, but this should do to put Dave at ease. Whatever they said, I didn't catch, instead passing out there on the floor. It started with my vision, then my body went numb, and then last to go was my hearing, with the last voice I heard was Benson saying something. In a way, I was relieved now that everything had stopped. Was I dead? Was I sleeping? Either way, all I could do was let whatever happens, happen. Well, that was an exciting afternoon, wasn't it? Oh, I didn't realize that Rabbit was an antagonist. I just kind of saw him in I don't know, there was a piece of fan art that the Password VN Twitter account retweeted. And it just kind of had, I assumed all the characters, and I don't know, the white rabbit stood out because he's white. In a sea of actual colors, the tint of white kind of stands out. And I was like, oh, there's a rabbit. That's cool, I guess. And a rat. But I guess those characters were off to the side in that image, I think. Oh man, it's been a month and a half since I seen that image, so I don't even know anymore. But yeah, we'll continue next time. Wow, I'm tired. See you around.